Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting Great British Road journey. This week we continue to explore the East Riding of Yorkshire. In the last episode we enjoyed the beautiful industry of Goole and Hull, and with those being the largest towns in the county, today we're left with the dregs, and as such we'll be visiting places you've probably never heard of. Accordingly then we'll be taking a journey from Market Weighton to Bridlington, which is by the seaside. How exciting! As always, to help navigate our way around, we'll be using my 1923 Michelin guidebook, period correct maps, and we start, like I said, with a place that you've probably never heard of. Market Weighton, a small town in the middle of East Yorkshire that, in the days of my guidebook, had around 1,700 residents and sod all going on. Being well connected with a now abandoned canal and railway that served as a junction between lines, you would have thought that the town would be an industrial giant or hugely populated, but no. It would seem that the town is merely a place you pass through to get to somewhere else. My guidebook doesn't list any tourist attractions, but it does suggest that if one would like to stay the night, why not consider the Londesborough Arms, a coaching inn that's located right in the middle of the town that was built in 1790, commissioned by the 5th Duke of Devonshire, and originally it was called the Devonshire Arms. That's quite a long sentence. The inn is still trading today, which is always nice to see, and inside they have a meeting room known as the Bradley Room. This is William Bradley. Shit, wrong statue. This is William Bradley. Who is William Bradley? He's the guy that a meeting room is named after, of course, but he was once a famous resident of Market Weighton, born in 1787. His fame is mostly down to the fact that he was 7 foot 9 inches tall by age 20, earning him the nickname of the Yorkshire Giant, which he cashed in on nicely by touring the country as part of a circus show.
Voiceover 1, please.
And speaking of touring circus shows, let's get on our way, and we'll be heading out of Market Weighton via the A1079, which in the old days was known as the A1079, and whilst the road has been upgraded a bit, it mostly follows the same route as it used to. Mostly. There's a really good dogging spot, example of a road realignment by way of this parking lay-by. The original road would have followed this route, but for some reason this would have been deemed unsafe by modern standards, resulting in the main road being realigned and the leftover original road being converted into this parking area for parking and nothing else. As we make our way to our next destination, we pass by a black mill known as Black Mill. However, it was originally known as Far Mill when it was constructed in 1650. At the time, it would have been one of 3 windmills operating in the area, but Far Mill was replaced in 1803 with the structure that we see today, which was known as Bateson's Mill, named after the bloke that built it. It sort of burned down in the late 1860s, at which point its internals were removed and the mill was taken out of action, then left abandoned for years, until 2018, at which point it was restored and it's now an ornament and landmark for the town of Beverly, which is our next destination. Was that all right with you, producer behind the camera? Let me show you today's producer, guys. Are you finding today's video amusing? In the days of my guidebook, Beverly was a fairly busy place with over 13,000 residents. The town was built around the corn milling and tanning industries, but later it would move into shipbuilding, which is odd because there's no sea. However, we'll come back to that because my guidebook suggests that maybe we'd like to visit Beverley Minster. And yes, we visited a Minster last week in Howden, but this one is much nicer with the added bonus of being complete, and indeed it's described as a Gothic masterpiece. Fair enough, that's not bad, is it? The structure was completed in 1420, and it amazes me that people were able to build things like this without computer modelling or whatever. However, within the Minster's main tower is something that offers an insight as to how they might have managed by way of a large treadwheel crane, used to lift heavy things from the ground levels to the upper levels, and considering this is the largest parish church in England, that was probably quite useful. And of course, no church is complete without a priest's massive organ. As mentioned, despite being some distance from the sea, Beverley was involved in shipbuilding from a shipyard that was established in 1884 on the River Hull. They quickly realised that it may not have been the best location for a shipyard. The river limited the size of boats that they could produce, but to get around this, a lot of effort was put into dredging the river to make it deeper, and that solved their problem. Of course, you could just build ships nearer to the sea. Interestingly, Beverley Shipyard was one of only a few shipyards that would launch their boats broadside, aka yeet it into the water. And we will yeet ourselves onto the A1035 to get to our next destination, and almost immediately we've got a bit of a problem. To stay on the period correct route, our maps say we need to go this way through the small village of Hull Bridge. But we can't. The road bridge that crosses over the River Hull has been removed, making it impossible to follow the original route. It's now been replaced by a more modern road and a newer bridge as part of a bypass, which we'll have to use if we want to continue. Which we do, because I'm here now. Good, so we'll crack on then, and we'll be heading up the A165, passing Leven and Brandesburton on the way. Nope, never heard of them either, and whilst I did try to find something to look at, there's nothing there. Besides, there's an industrial estate I want to look at, which is infinitely more interesting. Located to the south of Bridlington is the Carnaby Industrial Estate, which is almost a perfect rectangle, and that's because it's built on what used to be RAF Carnaby. The airfield was built as an emergency landing airfield in 1944, and these are slightly different from your traditional wartime airfield in as much as they have one singular massive runway, in this case 2,700 metres long and 230 metres wide. The idea was that damaged aircraft returning from the continent could land here with plenty of space available with the appropriate emergency services on the ground, and by the time the second small disagreement came to an end, Carnaby had seen over 1,400 emergency landings, which is quite a lot considering it was only used for just over a year. Interestingly though, we can find some remains of that huge runway right at the end of the industrial estate. It's not much, but I imagine these bits of asphalt and concrete had quite an eventful if short life. Completely unrelated, the access road through the industrial estate is a perfect straight, broken up by a few roundabouts with a lovely hairpin at the end if you own a rusty MX-5 with a welded diff. Just saying. Next up is the town of Bridlington, a once thriving port and seaside resort town. Today, not so much. Sure, there's a bit of an industry exporting shellfish to Europe, but I imagine that's not going so well since never mind. But back in the days of my guidebook, the town was still very much enjoying seaside resort tourism, suggesting that we visit Bridlington Spa Gardens and Harbour, so let's do that. It's dog shit. Bit of an issue actually. I'm not convinced that what my guidebook calls the Spa Gardens exists in any capacity. Yes, there is the Bridlington Spa building, but the map in my guidebook puts the Spa Gardens at a different location, a location that was redeveloped in 2016, so I've no idea. That said, the Bridlington Spa building certainly did exist in the days of my guidebook. It was built in 1896 and it was a leading entertainment resort. And then it burned down in 1906. Maybe there was a garden of sorts here after all. No bother though, in 1926 they rebuilt the building by building a building with a beautiful Art Deco design, which then burned down in 1932. However, I think most of the main building survived, which is what we're looking at today. Next to the spa is the not quite as nice to look at Bridlington Harbour, which was first used in the 1100s and is still trading today, albeit in a much smaller capacity. Bridlington Harbour has earned itself the name of the lobster capital of Europe, and as the name implies, they're pretty good at catching lobster, which are then sent all around the world, not just Europe, to be put on the plate of some posh twat. But who knew that some of the world's favourite lobsters came from a crappy bit of the North Sea in Yorkshire? Most of the harbour that we see today was built in the early 1800s, with the North Pier section now a grade listed structure. But the whole thing very nearly closed down when in the 1840s the railways came along, and with that a lot of the trade disappeared almost overnight. However, something unexpected happened. The railways brought in tourists. A shitload of tourists, and for some reason they all wanted to visit the harbour. It accidentally became a tourist attraction, and very quickly things like boat tours were set up and a whole new market opened up for the harbour. And here I am visiting it as a tourist, 180 years later? An unexpected product of Bridlington is surfing. Well, sort of. In 1890, two visiting Hawaiian princes were brought to the seaside at Bridlington where they enjoyed a bit of surfing, much to the amazement of onlookers, because until that point nobody had any idea that you could do such a thing, and it was the first time that surfing had been seen in England. I always thought it was invented by some hippie in Newquay, but apparently not. And there we are then guys, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching, I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That'll be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Till then, take care, bye-bye. Say bye-bye, cows. Right off, you can. Fucking hell. Don't make me punch your beard off, I fucking will, mate.